Welcome to Perusing's Appraisers on Purpose podcast. Our podcast showcases inspiring appraisers and professionals from the industry who are leaders in their field. How did they get to where they are? What have they learned along the way? What can we learn from them? Your host is real estate investor, entrepreneur, and appraiser, Michael Hobbs.
All right. Well, welcome back. We are once again excited to have another just unique and intriguing and informative guest. I am distinctly excited to share our conversation. But before I do, remember, none of this happens without you. And that's how impactful you are. That's how important you are. From that standpoint, please take the step right now to share the love. Click like on whether it's Spotify or Apple Podcasts, or a number of people these days are actually getting it on YouTube and literally blowing it around the world. But please do that. And of course, definitely want to see your feedback, your thoughts, your suggestions in the comments. And with that, I am grateful to introduce our guest, Alex Dinh. Alex, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Michael, and thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome. Man, we're thrilled to have you here. You bring a unique perspective, and let's just jump right in to help people understand that a little bit. We all want to know, were you born this way, or how did your life come to intersect the valuation and appraisal professions?
No, I think it's the answer with everyone. It was a little bit different for me. I did decide to pursue a career into real estate appraising, but it wasn't until much later. For those who don't know me, my name's Alex. I'm originally born in Europe. I was born in Paris, France.
Oh my gosh, Alex, you were the first person on the podcast that was born in Paris, France.
What can I say? I am worldwide, Mr. International. I give Pitbull, the musical artist, a run for his money.
I love your sense of humor, Alex. It's beautiful.
Yeah, so born and raised in Paris, France, lived there for 11 years, through a lot of crazy things, eventually relocated to the States, lived in Houston, Texas, small rural town in Pennsylvania, and then eventually moved to Phoenix, Arizona, which is where I started my career, and I am now been in Nashville, Tennessee. So, wow. A little bit everywhere.
That's a little bit everywhere. Wow, you've covered more of the states than most people have, and you started outside the country, no less. So how many languages do you speak, Alex? I think you're gonna suddenly shatter our new record. I mean, you're gonna shatter the record and set a new bar.
Fluently, one, not fluently, and kind of like I can jimmy my way around. Probably 2 or 3.
Nice.
I can definitely tell when my mom, who's fluent in Vietnamese, is mad at me. I think for any good son to mother to like adopt like a mother relationship, that's always good to know. And I have passable French, but it is very rusty. So I'm working my way to get back into it actually this year. So pretty excited about that.
Got it. Love that. So you had an opportunity to kind of move around the country. That's a pretty phenomenal thing. And I know when we were catching up earlier, it was fascinating to hear a little bit about your background in and around all of your experience, your technical experience, well before the appraisal industry.
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey. When fast forward into the more career time period in college, I went to college originally to become a video game designer, specifically in like the field of level design. So, the levels that people play their video games on, someone's got to make it. And so that was where I was my focus on a lot. And then I eventually learned it was incredibly hard to get into. Apparently even harder to get into appraising. And and then eventually decided to get a double bachelor in video production, specializing in visual effects, which is where I did visual effects as a freelancer for a few years before I retired from that tech field and then went into corporate America, where I was a claims adjuster, and then eventually pursued my love for becoming an appraiser, which still challenging to get into, but I got very, very lucky. So,
I mean, Alex, I think it's so impressive that, your background, is someone that was headed in the direction of creating the next Minecraft or Grand Theft Auto, or Mortal Kombat, or even just good old Tetris. I mean, maybe one of the Super Marios in there. I mean, that was basically you. And I mean, I appreciate, when you go by your alter ego, I mean, you've already like crushed it in that other space. And then you decided to kind of retire and, try out something new like real estate appraisal.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I feel like, so I started becoming an appraiser about over 3 years ago, which is a little bit younger per se in what most people in our field who are. But I would say that like for most adults, their early 20s through late 20s is a huge growth part of for any human beings. And from each of those fields, I learned a few things. So when I decided to go into real estate appraising, it was a very deliberate situation. It was a perfect way of like doing balance and bringing like the tech aspect of things that I knew to bring it over and how I can make it a lot more efficient for what I've learned and then going into the field. So yeah, it's been interesting, but I love every bit of it. And it's been very cool to like see now that a lot of the tech on how it's involving our industry and the next things I'm hoping to see in the next few years.
No, I appreciate that, Alex. It was fascinating, given your field of study in, computer and technology and specifically visual effects. And you look at, for many people that understand it, it's obvious, but for those that don't, I mean, there is so much talent, programming, and coding that goes into these games that they'll do hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in revenue. And you were headed in that direction, but you touched on, and I appreciated your honest comment. You're like, that was really hard to get into, but it wasn't as hard as appraisal, which was fascinating because you took a little path in between getting into appraisal, and that was in the insurance space. I think you said you were doing claims adjusting.
Yeah, it let me learn a lot about the different type of entities that you're involved. When you go into a creative field like video game design or visual effects, even breaking into, it's similar in the way of like you're kind of like a one-man shop, a contractor per se, where you're trying to network with clients, and you're trying to like do a lot of the things that you would be as an independent appraiser, which, there's pros and cons to all that. And then when I went to the more corporate as a claims, you kind of learn how to work in a bigger environment and working with other people in the same. So both of those have pros and cons I was able to pull to then eventually get to where I'm at. Yeah, it's interesting to say the least, but yeah, it's really cool.
So what was it for you? And this is really when people kind of wonder like, wow, first time opportunity to have someone of Alex's background and Alex's pedigree, if you will, as a recent joiner in the industry. What was it for you when you were in the insurance space that brought you into awareness of appraisal and then actually got you interested in the valuation profession?
Sure. I think a big thing that was I love real estate. Even as a kid, I really love when you go in high school, you take this test of like, what kind of careers you want into. Real estate appraising was not on the radar, but interior design was, and architecture was a big thing I was actually potentially thinking about going down. So I always fell in love with real estate, which, again, interior design went into like visual, went into like game level design and all of those things. But when I was working in claims, the one thing that I really that was kind of like missing was like the balance of work and life, which I think, with COVID, which happened the last few years, it really showed like it pulled us out of the situation of the typical just being in an office and working all the time, and family and how that's important to us, and like having that actual balance. So working in corporate claims, sometimes you work a lot more hours. The commute can be very extreme sometimes, just as much as you can do working at home. So yeah, I think it was a lot more work-life balance I wanted. It was also, I was getting, transparently compensated for the work that I did and not for the hours that was just put in, which I think was very important to me too.
Yeah, when we were chatting earlier, you mentioned that at the time you were, I think you said you were in the Phoenix market, right?
Correct. Yeah, I started in the Phoenix market in Arizona.
And then what was that process for you? Did you start researching appraisal, or was it that you met somebody, or that somebody invited you along and you said sure? Because this is a spotlight into an area of how do talented young professionals like yourself gain more opportunities into the profession, so that people like me and others that may have been around for a while can learn and grow in our efforts to connect with people like you.
Sure. I think it was so when I started my search to become an appraiser, it was a bit like a perfect storm per se. It was right when COVID was past the stage of people were constantly stuck at home. They were giving a little bit more freedom to go out. And it also reflected on how the appraisal industry at the time was lacking because there were so much demands. We're talking where it was like 6 weeks to get an appraisal done, those kinds of really long turn times. And so back then I was like, okay, I wanted to become an appraiser. So I got my training license, and I literally called about 100 appraisers in my market.
No way.
Like, hey, yeah, I called. I made the cold calls. I Google real estate appraisers in Phoenix, Arizona, and I just called people. Unfortunately, I emailed them, and no one really had an interest in getting a trainee. And to each their own. It's a big responsibility to take on a trainee to do so. So, there's a lot of things that goes into it. But I think it also, as I'm going back to the perfect storm, it also made a lot of companies realize, wow, there's so much demand. And it really reflected, we need more blood into our industry. And so after, literally it's been a year at this point, I took a break from, applying and calling people. And I was working my claims job, and I had this weird gut feeling, you know what, let me hop on Indeed. And out of nowhere, there was this job post for this company looking for trainees. I was like,
oh, really? On Indeed.com?
Yeah. On Indeed.
No way. I had no idea.
Yeah. So I was like, you know what, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Send my application.
Spoken like Michael Jordan right there. Holy cow.
Not as tall as Michael Jordan, but I'll take it.
But nearly as talented. What you're saying, nearly as talented.
I don't know. He has a legacy. I got to work to get to that legacy. So always got to improve.
Legacies come with work. I have to agree.
So I sent in the application, and I think literally within an hour, I got a text.
Wow. What was it that, as you were looking, and you were particularly looking, which is not always the way it goes, what was it about that particular post that caught your attention, or was it literally just the only post?
80% of all businesses fail within 5 years, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. With so many roles and responsibilities that must be managed and have nothing to do with appraisal reports, is it any surprise that it's hard to keep up? Much less having a sense of peace, stability, and profitability that comes from growing your business? Given all of this, you might already be thinking about exiting your business one day. Don't miss the limited opportunity to work with Michael, a real estate expert and professional coach. He has worked with more than 300 owners and entrepreneurs to find their highest and best use by solving problems that reach their most important goals. Compress decades of learning into days by working with Michael. Michael is famous in real estate and business coaching. With his help, you can accelerate your growth, increase your quality of life, and earn more money, all while ultimately doing less. Michael helps you not just grow your business, but also find new purpose in it and in your life. If you're ready to take control instead of being controlled, contact him on LinkedIn or email him at michaelh@paru.com.
I think there were a couple of other companies, but I think that was the one I kind of really posed. So the company that I started working with, the name is RSDS.
Mm-hmm.
They are a kind of one of the newer players in the field, where their initiative is to take a lot of bringing a lot of new blood into the field and trainee. At one point, I think they had the most amount of trainees in the U.S. at the time.
Oh, wow. It's impressive.
And it's now a whole national force. phenomenal people to work with and a lot of talent behind it. So I got onto them, and I think I was like one of their first employees, and I learned a lot from them. But the post was, like they were. I think for those who are like who's been in the game for long enough, or those who are trying to get into real estate appraising, when I called those almost 100 appraisers, I asked like, I'll work for you for free. You don't have to pay me for gas. I just want to get the experience I can learn.
Yes.
And the post was like, hey, we will pay you. You will get some benefits. It was like, that's extremely rare. And I think now we're starting to see that happen more often with a few more companies. And I'm glad that's picking up momentum to see in our field, just because like there's so much more talents out there. And especially with the ADI, the Appraisal Diversity Initiative, that we're seeing people that are from like outside of the country for like now getting involved. So I'm very excited for that too. But yeah, the post was like, this is too good to be true. I'll send in. And then I got the reply back. I was like, oh, game on. So I was like, all right, let's just dive in.
Oh, wow.
And just go.
So what happened next for you? So you get a reply within an hour via text. I mean, it's pretty cutting edge compared to, people that used to use pigeons or, the United States Postal Service.
Yeah, there was like, at one point, I think there was like a torch and you could see from a mile away that was like being lit up, or that might have been for like Game of Thrones. I can't remember nowadays, but yeah, it was, that's the thing too. I think like it shows like how much technology is being more and more involved in our industry. So I got a text. It was a questionnaire. I texted them right back. And then before I knew it, the next day, I did a shadow with the company and with the staff that was there, and we got kind of like more hands-on, and we learned, and then I fell in love with it, and then I brought it done.
Oh, fantastic! And did you? I think you and I discussed this as well, that you were in one location, and then as a result, you've moved into some other markets as well.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, my journey started back in Phoenix. About a year and a half ago, I relocated here to currently my home, which is Nashville, Tennessee, where I cover the market and I learn a whole different thing. And for those who have worked in different markets, it can be very challenging. Take your time. And I would say, another thing, use technology to network. I reach out to a lot of people through like LinkedIn and like a lot of like, forums to try to reach out to appraisers that were here in Tennessee so I could learn how to appraise houses, because it is very much a night and day difference between here and back in Phoenix. So,
and when you would reach out to people, what would you typically say? Like, hi, my name's Alex. I'm single. I mean, was it that kind of a post, or was it a little bit different, a little more professional in nature?
It was a little less like Craigslist, but more like
it wasn't Match.com, is what you're telling us.
No. It's my profile is much better now. No, I'm just kidding.
That's good.
But I was like, hey, my name's Alex. I'm a new appraiser here in Tennessee. I was wondering if I could pick your brain, get a better understanding of the market, and like maybe go out for drinks or just hang out and things like that. And like I said, from the other side of the coin, it can be very scary to see if people even want to, like, who is this new person? And like, this new person is coming to my market and things of that sort. So yeah, I can see it be a little bit scary. And so the benefit of it too is like, we did have another appraiser from the company that was here, and I was able to like also get a lot of like feedback, understanding how like this area works. Which is, again, Nashville is a very diverse place with a lot of different types of properties, which makes it a lot of fun for me, at least. But yeah, that was a good way.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
If I can say anything to appraisers, just talk, reach out to people.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate that. And Alex, I thought it would be helpful as well for people to be able to hear kind of your perspective of what was it that really, from your perspective, obviously it appealed to you. But what is it that people like myself and others that maybe have been around the profession for a while could be either aware of or could highlight as a way to attract talented people like you to our respective firms?
Sure. I think one of the biggest things is, at least from a perspective like a newer professional in our field, is that I think ironically enough is just talk about it more, being more vocal about it. I think of all the different type of real estate professions out there. I think real estate appraising is still one of the most least talked about. It's more of like an underdog still. Like, whenever we think of real estate, I think people think immediately a real estate agent / broker, or they think of maybe a loan originator, a loan officer, or anything like that. I think just talking to people who are not in our current field, to be like, oh, what's this about real estate appraising? What is this all about?
Oh, I see.
And yeah, I think that could be a great way to just like talk about it, because exposure would be more. And I think exposure, just like you're doing with this podcast, and that's also being shown on YouTube, is use those technological platforms to really bring out the industry to a wider audience. I think that's going to be one of the big things that's going to be interesting, a lot of potential for a lot of professionals out there.
Oh, I appreciate that. And I mean, Alex, given your, undergraduate study and your love of gaming, your natural disposition, if you will, with technology, what as you look, in this industry particularly, as you look ahead over the next 3 to 5 years, what are you most interested and excited and optimistic about?
I think the elephant in the room at this current time frame, I think, would be AI, right? Mm-hmm. I think your last guest talked a lot about AI, which I'm not super familiar with. But as someone who has worked with a lot of technology in my past, I would say embrace the technology. Technology is here as a tool. So that way you can use it to elevate your skill set and you'll really stand out. I think other technology beside AI that I'm really excited about, a perfect example is a company, Cubicasa, who does a lot of scanning for the room so you can get like a digital sketch. That's a great tool right there. And I also think that the next level of it would be, maybe seeing 3D, a combination of like Mark Zuckerberg's The Metaverse, and then that having like a 3D rendering so you can actually see the inside. That could be a very good tool for the future for all appraisers, but also even for like a teaching tool, right? Imagine the scenario as a trainee, because now a lot more companies are willing to let trainees go independently on some of these houses. You go in, the trainee does a scan, they have a full 3D rendering. Maybe the trainer pop up those VR goggles and look exactly what the trainee is looking at, and maybe pick up details the trainee might not see. I think, again, technology is a wonderful tool that you can use to elevate things. That I think even shows now that like the turnaround time of a lot of our work is infinitely faster nowadays. So I would say don't shy away from technology. Use it. Don't let technology use you. Use technology.
That's fantastic. Well, Alex, I really appreciate the opportunity to invite you on the podcast and share your perspective. It's been not only enjoyable, but also insightful for me just to, hear how you got connected to the profession and what you find so fascinating about it. Sometimes one of the challenges of being around something for a little while is you don't realize that you kind of see things the same way ongoingly. And it's not until you hear a different, and in your case, fresh perspective, it's like, oh, wow, that's interesting. That's insightful. That's inspiring. That's unexpected. And sometimes it's like, wow, that's just right in front of me. And sometimes it's obvious. So I'm definitely grateful for you sharing your perspective. Anything else you'd like to share in closing for those that might be considering the profession or would be ones that would want to help entice people to get into this, fascinating and growing industry that has a lot of opportunities in the future because of technology?
Sure. I think the number one the thing for me personally that I love about appraising is that every appraisal to me is like a fun puzzle. There are so many different factors and things that makes it very enticing to me because it challenges your mind, it challenges you as a professional, and you get to learn about it. So I would say if you're looking for like work that's not outside of just like writing a report, but it's a fun puzzle, but it also has such a bigger meaning because it could be a loan for a refinance for someone. or the transaction for someone's forever home. Those are things that I think that has an impact, and it's always fun to do something like that and be involved in. So I would say that, and also change is the only constant in our life. So embrace it.
That is a great way to put it. Well, Alex, I just want to again thank you for being part of the Perusings podcast. Thank you for your fresh perspective. And I am encouraged by not only you being a part of the industry, but your optimistic outlook and embracing of technology.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate for the time and the platform.
No, very welcome. Very welcome. With that, friends, we're going to bring it to a close. Thanks for this, snippet and, in this case, synopsis of new talent and new professionals that are ongoingly joining and revitalizing this very industry. And with that, until our next episode.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Perusings, Appraisers on Purpose. We hope you enjoyed learning from the amazing professional paths and achievements of our beloved guests. Before we go, please subscribe on your listening channel, Spotify, LinkedIn, YouTube, and other podcast channels to hear more from appraisers and valuers regarding their life and their work. After you drop a comment below, who is one friend and peer you can generously share this episode with? If you have any suggestions or questions for future episodes, we'd love to hear from you. Just send us a message on LinkedIn and we'll be sure to get back to you. Thanks again for listening, and until we're together again for the next session of Perusings, Appraisers on Purpose, create the change that you seek.